Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and it is once again time for Indie Game Friday, where each week I take a look at a different independent role-playing game. This week I'm taking a look at an action dungeon-crawling RPG with a vampire focus, Bloodlust 2 Nemesis. Developed and published by WRF Studios, it was released from Early Access on March 26, 2020. So I did a first impression on this game a few months back while it was still in Early Access, and I did mention that I would take a look at it on release. Scheduling has added just under a month to that idea, but I figured now that it is released, I'd go ahead and take a look at it regardless, just to see how it compares. Bloodlust Nemesis is basically a procedurally generated dungeon crawler set in a modern or near-future world where vampires run rampant. In terms of plot, you are a shadow hunter, a hunter of vampires who has killed a vampiric emperor and destroyed their entire bloodline. Now, the hunter has been psychically placed into the body of a vampire so that they can infiltrate the remaining bloodlines in the city and track down the origins of a new synthetic blood that has been giving the vampires unusual powers and strength. When you create a character, you can select a name, a gender, as well as set various appearance details, then roll attributes. Each character has 6 basic attributes: strength, dexterity, charisma, vitality, intelligence, and persuasion. Characters can also get 5 bonus points to spend. Interestingly enough, there doesn't seem to be any tie as to the randomized element of the attributes, so you can basically re-roll until you get something conducive to what you want to play. Aside from the randomized attributes and the spendable points, you can also choose a class. This doesn't actually set your class, since Nemesis defines your class by a total of certain attributes and gives you bonuses based on whatever is the highest. However, selecting a class type on the character creation screen gives a flat bonus to that character's class's prime requisite. Finally, you can select a clan affiliation, which boosts your initial reputation with one particular clan, which can be useful to pick up early-stage skills. Once in the game, you've got an interface that consists of a mini-map, a hotkey layout that shows hotkeyed skills, an icon in the lower right that shows what skill is selected, an objective tracker, an indicator showing current health and blood level, as well as spirit point level, and eventually a list of thralls as you collect them. Spirit points are used to activate various vampiric abilities, whereas the health indicator may be a little bit more complex than most RPGs show. It represents not only the health of the character, but also the blood level, or how much blood that they've drunk recently. As wounds are taken and actions are performed, the character's overall blood level goes down, which can limit how far their hit points can regenerate. If a character's hit points are below the blood level, they will rapidly regenerate until they reach the blood level, but not beyond. The blood level may be raised by feeding on various victim NPCs found in the dungeons. Other character statistics can be seen on the character screen. The 6 basic attributes affect various aspects of play, but there's also an overall attack rating, a crit percentage, additional elemental damage in the form of fire, lightning, light, or poison. Characters also have a defense rating based on their equipped items, and 3 resistances versus various attacks: fire, silver, and light. A character also has an experience total, which increases their bloodline level when certain totals are reached. Each bloodline level, characters get a few points to distribute amongst their attributes, as well as a skill point and a talent point. Skills are effectively various attacks and spells that a character can take. They may take various amounts of spirit points to use, have casting times, and may have damage affected by certain stats, depending on the skill. A lot of skills are basically associated with various clans and may require a minimum amount of reputation in order to learn particular levels of that skill. Talents, on the other hand, are more passive effects and come in tiers. Many talents require you to have at least 1 point in an earlier talent in order to take them, and most talents have multiple levels within each particular talent. It's a bit difficult sometimes to see how talents may be related to early ones in the tree, but it's still an alright means of organization all in all. You can also review your various thralls in a sire tree. When you bite certain NPCs, they become your vampiric thrall, and you can summon them for battle or set them to tasks behind the scenes. The sire tree lets you inspect them to see their current status, upgrade their abilities if they've gained enough experience for you to do so, or to collect loot that they may have found if you've got them back home collecting loot. Finally, there's an inventory system which allows the character to equip items in a number of slots, most of which simply add armor or adjust various attributes to other elements of the character's capabilities. There's a helm hat slot, an ice slot, a amulet slot, 4 ring slots, 2 weapon slots, an offhand slot, a chest slot, a hand slot, a leg slot, and a feet slot. Further, characters have a limited amount of inventory space as well as a count of silver. Items may be identified or unidentified when found and are divided into color-coded rarities. Many also have specific types and often have basic requirements to even equip them, some of which may make little sense, but they do serve as a way to encourage distribution of attribute points beyond just what the basic character class requires. Some items may also have gem slots, which can socket particular types of gems that can be uncovered in the labyrinth. Occasionally you'll find an item that's associated with a particular clan, and when you have that item, you can actually gain faction in that clan by going to that clan's headquarters and donating it back to them. Gameplay itself is relatively straightforward. There are various dungeons in the city, and you are given quests to venture into them to accomplish certain goals. Many levels seem randomly generated, or there are a few statically designed ones among the mix, and they contain a random mix of enemies, victim NPCs, guards, and the occasional roving merchant, with some levels also have placed quest-related NPCs or bosses. You generally explore these dungeons, fighting various enemies, using your skills, smash furniture up and open chests, and collect loot. Sometimes you have guards that you can have your Intimidate skill on and ask questions about the layout of the dungeon or force them to give you keycards to open locked doors. It's a really, really basic, effectively just a smash and loot system with an over-the-shoulder view. Searching items can be a little bit more complex, however, in that some may be trapped and detonate when they're smashed, so you have to keep an eye on them, and some are locked and require a minigame to open. The trapped items are usually very clearly trapped with a very visible box with a flashing light on it, and yet somehow if one is cruising through the dungeon quickly, it's surprisingly easy to miss and just blow yourself up anyway. Locked doors also generally require keycards to open, as it is a modern setting overall, and these can only be obtained from various guards, at least in the first dungeon. And then again, there are puzzle doors that can be opened when you activate certain buttons and switches. Navigating dungeons is further complicated by the secret doors and other hidden areas, as I was just saying. Some of these are relatively straightforward and may open just when you activate them, but others require you to push buttons or use other vampiric skills to activate them, which can be interesting in theory, but with the fast-paced nature of the game in general, mixed with the sometimes sameness of the presentation and the clunkiness of the various ability usage, it is more limited than one might expect. But more on that in just a moment. Nemesis does have a multiplayer element, however, as usual, I didn't have the opportunity to really properly evaluate it. It also has controller support, although I personally found the mouse and keyboard to be more to my taste. Graphically, it's alright. It's not AAA, it does show its budget here, and that can make the game seem like something from an earlier era, and that's even before accounting for the aesthetic. The sound design is decent at least, but the UI could use a lot more polish. There is voice acting, which ranges from pretty decent to kinda corny, although very little of what I heard was out and out just bad. More, it was over-manipulated on occasion. The controls and the combat mechanics are clunky in the extreme and feel like playing something straight out of the early 2000s. Although it is bearable, it does the game no favors. And that is somewhat sad, because the aesthetic is something straight out of the late 90s and early 2000s, featuring vampiric wars and clans with a strange mix of over-the-top background and network of conspiracies that are common to that genre. As silly as the storyline can be in places, I actually appreciate it for what it was, and thought the best parts of the game were those where it was focusing on the storyline. The problem, of course, is that the majority of the game is actually in the dungeon crawls, and I don't know why I'm dissatisfied with that, because dungeon crawling is usually my favorite part of a game. And the individual elements of the dungeon crawling in Bloodlust Nemesis are really decent taken individually. I like the randomized nature of things, the randomized loot drops, the secrets and the unique types of opening of certain doors of those secrets. Even the way certain traps and item stashes are set up is interesting individually. But something about it just doesn't seem completely there. It just doesn't quite click. Maybe it's the clunkiness of the combat that really does seem a little bit too frenetic to reliably use your skills or command the henchmen that you can acquire. Maybe it's the sameness of the dungeon levels that begin to feel repetitive after a while. Or maybe it's the fact that a lot of the secrets and such seem to rely on a slower pace of exploration, but the sheer speed of the enemies and combat in general, as well as being told of a distant presence of a wraith that you can only really run from, encourages you to really explore faster rather than slower. All in all, Bloodlust 2 Nemesis is not a bad game, but it's not great either. It almost feels a little bit unfinished in places, although that's mostly seen in the UI and combat rather than any features of the game itself. It is feature complete. It's got good ideas, but a flawed execution, and I feel although I can recommend it for people who like the vampire genre and the aesthetics that go along with that, I have to qualify that with a firm try to catch it on sale, unless you've simply got a huge budget to try such things. Not that it's overly expensive, it just seems more like it should be a little bit of a cheaper game. Or if you're a fan of the series, I will admit that. I've been using the term Bloodlust 2 and Bloodlust Nemesis fairly interchangeably here, because it is the sequel to a Bloodlust Shadowhunter, also available on Steam. but the 2 is sort of only intermittently used within the game itself. It doesn't even appear on the title screen, I don't think. So it is part of a series, although I'm not sure how well the stories connect, because I've never played the first one. As an aside, the mix of ancient and new gear is really amusing to me. I suspect it's meant to allow you to make your character stand out with its own style from amongst all the ages, but my characters generally tend to end up looking like a murderous hobo just knocked over a thrift store, and that makes me smile for some reason. At any rate, I'm going to wrap it up at that. As always, I'll put a link to where you can pick it up in the description below. For now, this has been the RPG Crawler with Indie Game Friday Bloodlust 2 Nemesis. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. Until next time, take care and goodbye. And if you're still watching this far, I'd like to take a moment to thank those who have supported this channel via Patreon or direct donations throughout the years, without which this channel could not have lasted as long as it has. For those who are feeling particularly generous, you can still support my work through Patreon and now through Subscribestar as well, through the links in the description below.